Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tastemakers podcast. This is, of course, the podcast where we sample what is going on in the world of television and film and let you know what's worth watching, what's worth ignoring, and maybe just what you should know if you want to talk about stuff. That is what we do here. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, and I am with my co-host, Grace Leeder. How you doing, Grace?
I'm doing well. I feel like I sampled less things, and I was surprised to hear that you've sampled many things this week. But I feel like I was like served up an enormous amount of what I ate this week between Deadpool and Wolverine and then the subsequent San Diego Comic-Con. So, yeah.
I very much tried to do as much sampling as possible to catch up on all of the previous non-sample doing in previous weeks.
Yeah.
So I have watched a bunch of shows. Maybe I'll let you know what I've caught up on at the end of this podcast so that you can maybe prep for what I might want to talk about next week. But what we are here to do today is that this is going to be a very special spoiler-filled episode of the Tastemakers podcast, where we're going to talk about 3 big shows that recently ended: The Boys, The Acolyte, and Presumed Innocent. They all ended around the same time. We've watched all of the season of each of them. There's the first season, or not the first, but it's a full season of each of them that we have watched.
Yeah. 2 of them are the first season. One of them is the 4th season. Is that right? That's right. Yeah, that is right.
So we're going to talk about them. We will have them all clearly labeled and marked so that you can skip around if you have not watched yet, or that you don't want to be spoiled, or you just don't plan on watching the show at all.
Come back later once you have watched the thing that you didn't watch and you know exactly where to jump back in, or just listen the whole time and be spoiled. Who cares? Just do it. Just listen to us.
Yeah, I mean, if you never plan to watch, it'll be fun to hear, I think, weird stuff about a show that you won't watch.
Yeah, some of these will be very fun to talk through for people who have not been watching them, because they're all something. Tara, 3 shows. These are all something. Yeah, it's very interesting right now that like these 3 shows ended. House of the Dragon, we just talked about the penultimate episode this week. We spoil that each week right after the episode, and then I'm kind of intrigued to see like what's gonna pop up next. I feel like you were like doing the tasting menu to see like what maybe will be the show of the like midsummer. I don't know that I like kind of like put anything as a guarantee, but these shows were kind of hits. A lot of people watched them and talked about them.
Yes, very true. They all did very well. I think before we get into that, there's a little bit of news in the world of television and mostly film at the moment. Of course, Comic-Con happening, Marvel having a big moment right now. We talked about Deadpool and Wolverine being like, how is this going to land? And it's kind of like breaking records right now in the box office, doing very, very well.
Yeah, I think broke the record for an R-rated movie at the box office, the biggest box office return ever for an R-rated movie. I did see it. I saw it on Friday. I really liked it. The more I left the movie theater, the more I was like, maybe that wasn't good, and that wasn't good, and that wasn't good. But in the moment, it was so fun. It was very fun. I was in a packed theater. It's not exactly what I thought, which was much more of a love letter to the Fox era universe of movies. And we got a note last week that like part of the delay here, which we didn't really mention in terms of like why Deadpool has taken so long to get Deadpool 3 has taken so long to get made, is that basically as they were prepping to do Deadpool 3, Fox got bought by Disney. And so now it's like incorporated into the larger MC universe. And then obviously like COVID and writer strikes and all of that stuff basically like delayed Deadpool 3 from happening. And so now it's here. It's a Marvel movie. It doesn't feel very Marvel-y to me. It does some Marvel stuff, but it's very much like, remember all those Fox movies? And I think this is Ryan Reynolds being like a love letter to them, and Sean Levy doing that. Hugh Jackman is like phenomenal in this movie. I think like acts his butt off. And it's very fun. I think like, if you watch the other Deadpool movies, you know exactly the type of humor you're getting. I think it's worth going and having fun. Just don't think about it a lot after, which I know is hard. Literally like the antithesis of a podcast there. It's like, don't think or talk about it or listen to people talking about it afterwards, because it will like, I think you will be like, why didn't they do any of this stuff that they maybe should have done? But for a movie going experience, the vibes were off the chart, Taran. So
I mean that tracks for me. That's kind of I think a somewhat expected result. I was not able to watch the movie. I was out this weekend, and I was like, I wonder if I've got some time. I'm already out.
Mhm.
Let's see if there's any movies playing. Of course, Deadpool. Let's see if there's any showings. No, they're literally all sold out everywhere,
Wow.
basically. So I was actually like, I had a small window of opportunity. Was not able to see it because it's doing so well.
Wow.
So
Okay.
interesting stuff there. And then, of course, at Comic Con, big moment. Robert Downey Jr. returning to the MCU as Doctor Doom.
Doctor Doom. Yeah. I mean, I gotta say the like pop from the San Diego Cop, like watching the video and like people immediately on Twitter being like, "What? Like, is this real?" was pretty fun. I said this on Twitter. I feel like this is a complete pro wrestling move to just be like, none of the stuff, none of the new stars we're trying to make are working. Let's just bring in The Rock or Stone Cold Steve Austin and get the big pop. I don't know. I'm like, completely. I don't think I'm invested in the MCU being successful in the same way I think some other people are. So I'm kind of like, let's see what they do. It does definitely. There is a tinge of desperation to it. Of like, all right, we got the Russos, and then let's bring back Robert Downey Jr. as a new character. But if they tell a fun story, then who am I? And I kind of really. There's a lot of stuff that I really like in the sort of like bad MCU period. I liked the Eternals, Taran, and I know like everybody hated the Eternals, but I kind of like it. But if like people aren't jiving with that stuff, I don't know what else are they gonna do. And I do think this, like for me, this is just gonna like buoy like Fantastic Four and X-Men, all the other stuff they're doing. And I feel like that could work as long as they like don't completely put all of their eggs in this like let's just bring everybody back thing. If they can use it to drive interest in new stuff, which like the other big pop of the weekend was like Pedro Pascal. So that seemed to be well received. So that to me is interesting. If they can like use Robert Downey Jr. to like help kind of usher in the new era after it kind of hasn't been working. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I think my reaction is oh, that's fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty much it. I don't really have much else to say on it, to be honest. There's only so much MCU scholarship that one can truly have. But that's kind of like the big news. So, of course, if for some reason you were left out of the loop, now maybe you're a little bit more in the loop.
And there might be some additional MCU news coverage coming. I can't guarantee anything, but we shall see if anything pops into your feed or on the YouTube channel.
Yes, people who probably have actual opinions on all of this stuff. I'm sure we'll talk more about. So let's get into the spoilers. Let's talk about some shows.
Let's do it. I've been itching. We sort of have to, hold ourselves to not spoil things, but this is us unleashed, Taran.
We are.
I'm tearing the bib off. I don't know if that's like the Tastemaker. I've been keeping myself clean, and now I don't know. Yeah,
we're franchising.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Everyone gets a taste. We'll start with The Boys. The Boys season 4. A bit of a return for the ratings that had dipped in season 3. The Boys season 4 does well, which is kind of I think a surprise, given that I think that season 3 there was a dip for a reason, but people returned for season 4. My theory at the time still kind of is that like they announced that season 5 was the end, and so people are like, oh, it's actually gonna maybe go somewhere then. And then in addition to that, of course, like there's still most of what I see about The Boys online is all about like, oh, people didn't realize that it's political, which I swear, I'm telling you, I've said this before. I've seen that meme since basically season 1. But it really hit this season for some reason. Maybe it's a political season, so who knows?
I think you're sort of like conspiracy theory. I don't know if it's a conspiracy, but like being like, maybe they just leaked that to like get attention on the show. I can't get that out of my brain of like, they just were like, let's just tell people that these people didn't get it before now. And then people will come and watch the show and see what they mean. So I think it's smart, Taran.
So The Boys season 4, it has ended. And I have thoughts. I mean, I've already given, I think, my general thoughts. I don't think those have really changed. My biggest criticism of The Boys has always been that it feels very wheel spinny. It feels like from the start of the season to the end of the season, like what did we really accomplish and how many of these storylines were really worth digging into. And I feel like by the end of the season, I kind of felt the same way. It kind of just felt like this could have been one episode.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel like week to week, this is not my favorite show. I think it's like such an interesting show. This season to me definitely did. I mean, like the joke is that like it got more obvious in its critique of who it's critiquing and satiring in a way that felt so obvious. And that's like, not to mention that there was like a literal Nazi in a previous season. So like, hard to be more obvious than that. But this season was like very graphic. And I don't know if that's just like it feels more graphic than previous seasons, and probably not, but it felt that way watching it week to week. And the only thing I can say in terms of like the counterpoint to that is I do feel like I see where they are setting up the end. And like I definitely think you can make the argument of like, just do that now and then let's see then let's see where you go. I think this is a show that has had a plan for how it'll end and has been in a little bit of that like limbo space of like, but it probably makes Amazon Prime some money and we want you to keep making it. At some point they made a compromise to end after season 5. I don't know if you saw this week, Taran, that there are rumors of a prequel series with Soldier Boy and is it Stormfront, I believe, the Nazi. Yeah. So they're like,
they're gonna keep going. They're just gonna be doing other things. Because listen, again, I think this storyline has run its course and probably had run its course by season 3. I think that like if this storyline had ended at season 3, it would have been like they stretched it a little, but they made it work. Whereas season 5, for me at least, is like they had one season of story, spun their wheels for 3 seasons, and then finished the story.
Yeah, I mean, there is a thing. There's an element, and I mean, I'll start fully spoiling it, which is I do think the Butcher Homelander stuff, when you add in Ryan, I think is interesting to me, and basically having Ryan, who's Homelander's son, also son of Butcher's ex-wife, and so like having Ryan spend basically the whole season like with Homelander and then realizing like this is bad and coming back and then realizing like how far gone Butcher is and that they basically want to use Ryan to kill Homelander, I think is for me compelling. I mean, very sad moment, Taran, that we lose my favorite named character on the show, Aunt Grace, which is what my nieces and nephew call me. So quite sad to lose Aunt Grace on the show. But that happened. I feel like things of note happen. They also kill like the vice president in the finale. So like I do feel like I can feel where they're feeling a little bit like they can loosen up a little bit as they head towards the end of
this is sort of what I mean,
show.
Though. Like all of these things happen in one episode.
They do all happen in one episode. Yeah, basically, yeah. Huey and then like the Huey and Starlight stuff, they're like basically on and off again, and then they get separated at the end, and like so Kimiko and Frenchie finally like kiss, and so like it's like, okay, like I definitely feel that. I still feel like week to week, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna hang out with the boys for a week, and I'm feeling like I'm excited for the final season to see what they actually do. But I can get that if you're like, wow, it took a really long time to get here. That's totally fair, I think.
Yeah, I think that's my main criticism. I do have other criticisms, especially of the finale. I think it was fine. But like they do some things that I don't love, especially like the whole stuff with Butcher, and then and forgive me because I don't know the names of the characters. Aunt Grace, for example, I couldn't even remember if she was alive in the show until she popped up in the finale, and I was like, oh, she's alive, and now she's dead. Okay, now she's dead.
Yeah, now Ryan killed her. I mean, yeah, sad. Yeah.
But like that whole thing, it just felt like, okay, well, we needed to like wait for the finale so that we could have this confrontation that then makes Butcher mad enough to kill the VP lady who blows up heads because we spent a season with her until she was finally going to do the but now she's dead because Butcher always has to do stuff in that way. And it's just like the whole thing is just like, it's a show that very much frustrates me. I described it as like a CW show, but graphic. And these
Which is
kinds
true.
of
He was on Supernatural. He ran
exactly, and
Supernatural
like
for years.
these kinds of tropes really frustrate me in terms of just like you know, it just doesn't feel like actual realistic character motivation. It more feels like, well, we want this to happen, and why would Butcher do this? Because he's mad about his son, and so how do we get the son thing to happen? Well, they screw up the thing, and they make him mad, and like it feels like they just work backwards constantly. So that was kind of annoying. And then also, I really did not enjoy one of my least favorite tropes that it's for some reason is coming up a lot, I feel like recently, but like this whole concept of having sex with a doppelganger and not treating that with the severity that it should be treated as. Like uh you know, I get it, it's the boys, they're like loosey goosey with this stuff, but like it really felt like what really like we're like Huey's gonna be like, yes, I got her, she's not mad at me for being sexually assaulted by somebody. Like, oh man, I'm so happy about like that was just weird to me.
It happens to Huey twice this season. I know a lot of
Yeah.
people did not love the scene where he ends up in like the sex dungeon, and everything that happens to him there, and finding that pretty off-putting. It's like, yeah, I mean, this is the stuff that I like find is my least favorite stuff of The Boys. Is certainly like when I was watching season 3 to get ready. There's like the orgy part, right? The super orgy. Literally, I think a man goes inside another man's penis and blows up. Like that's stuff that happens on this show. The Huey Starlight stuff is like so emblematic of like, yeah, a lot of these like, you know, will they, won't they type comedy stuff that really can struggle when you're like 5 seasons in terms of like, what can they be mad at each other about, and sort of this jealousy stuff. I would agree it didn't really work for me. And I think like Starlight in particular felt pretty sidelined this season. At one point is literally like locked in a basement.
Her powers don't work for a whole season, and then they start working again magically, and it's just like, again, just like, why why did we have to spend so much time doing that?
Yeah, especially because there is this thing with who's the like basically like Firecracker is like the all right
Firecracker.
soup influencer, and that's up being there, and then learning that like Starlight like sort of like bullied her as a kid. Like
That was a
there's some
super
stuff
weird storyline.
I know, but that's the stuff I'm more interested in. That I feel like part of what I think like doesn't work about it is that they don't really actually try to do anything with that, and end up just sort of like playing into a lot of these tropes. I did like I liked Jeffrey Dean Morgan on the show. I thought he was like a great choice to cast on the show. I don't know that like, I mean, this is another super tropey thing of like, actually this person is just in someone's imagination. He's like a fantastic choice.
I'm constantly on the lookout for that.
Yeah, who's not interacting?
I don't know
with
what
someone?
it is.
No.
There's a movie way back when I was a kid that I watched. It's a great movie, but it had that thing in it, and I caught it, and then ever since then I've always just been like, are they interacting with other people?
For me, there's a sort of famous Scrubs episode, Taran. If you're, it's a Brendan Fraser episode,
Same
which
deal.
is where like the first time I saw this, I just completely spoiled the Brendan Fraser episode of Scrubs. But
well, you didn't have to say that part of it.
it's a great episode, but yeah. I mean, I you know, where they leave off, I'm like interested. I'm like, okay, you know, like the one thing about the show in terms of like being so wheel spinny is like it is silly that like they're so powerful and they don't do anything, and like the amount of times that like Homelander is just like around, you know, like the Butcher or Huey and doesn't just like murder them all. Like literally this episode, he murders the vice president, but then has to be like in the last episode, but then he's like, all right, and then we will peacefully arrest the rest of the characters, you know?
That's such a frustrating angle of it for me, is that just like the whole point is that this guy is unstoppable, but he doesn't just kill them ever. And they're always coming up with like different dumb excuses as to why not. And they even had to do like this whole thing about like, oh man, head blower upper lady can't kill us because we've got that dirt on her. Remember, mutually assured. Is that like they're just constantly coming up with reasons why they're not dying, and then like this was so frustrating for me when the Deep is just like, screw it, I'm just gonna go kill them, and then they have a fight and nobody dies, not a single. It was like the entire point of the fight is just for Fast Guy, whose name I don't remember, to get caught because he had to go and save them, but nobody was ever actually gonna die because nobody ever actually needs to die from the main characters in the show until the finale, I'm sure, until the final season. And so that is like a huge part of it for me, is that like Homelander does not feel as dangerous as he should, given that he should just be killing everyone all the time, constantly. So that's annoying. But then it's also, I think the thing that maybe frustrated me the most about the finale was that end sequence where they all get captured.
Yeah.
Because I would have been interested in watching that part. That's like something is actually happening and you montaged it.
Yeah, them each in
like
their
they actually did.
like,
they made a move. They did something, and it's like, oh, it's like a montage, though.
That's for next season to have the ramifications that they'll probably be out of jail by episode 1, the end of episode 1. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, this show has such a gloss of like, all right, we're going to give you someone's head exploding, or like, I really love the episode or the moment where Homelander gets new Black Noir and the Deep to kill their like fervent supporters. And then they do it. And the Black Noir's like, wait, that was really messed up that we just did that. We did that. But that doesn't go anywhere really either. Yeah, I the thing about the show, I think, that like makes me keep watching it and why I like spending, sometimes more than an hour on the episode, Taran. I feel like the runtime is pretty long
at this point.
I think every episode this season was more than an hour. Is like, it's really well acted. Like, there's no doubt that I think like Huey and Butcher and Starlight and Homelander and like the whole way down, I think it's like extremely well acted, to the point where like I'm pretty annoyed about Jensen Ackles coming back, because that feels like they were like, oh my God, it was so fun to have him on the show. Let's keep having him on the show, in a way that like, that's one of the cliffhangers from the end of season 4 is like, oh, actually he's in a cryogenic freezer again, and we're going to unfreeze him. And seemingly like Homelander and him team up as sort of like one side. But I'm like, I don't know, yes, it's fine. He's really good, but like, you're not committing to the story that you're telling. But it's kind of like, it's an addictive quote. One thing I was thinking about, there's another podcast who was talking recently about a show that we're going to talk about today, as a gourmet cheeseburger. And we talked in one of the earlier episodes of Tastemakers, actually might have been an unaired pilot, Taran, was like, do we have a Tastemakers rating system? And I don't know that we need to like do this all the time, but what is sort of like the food for the Tastemakers? What is like the food comparison of the boys? And for me, it's probably like just a fast food burger, right? That's just like, I love it when I eat it, and I hate that
it's like a mac and cheese burger.
Okay, yes, very good. Yeah,
it's like it's not just like regular fast food.
That's right. That's right.
Particularly grotesque. But
it's the special one-time option,
that you're like, oh, that sounds so good. It's a donut burger, and then you have it, and you're like,
oh man,
it's got its appeal.
It doesn't quite look the same as the graphic as it did, or the first time you have it, like, this is amazing, and you have it again, and you're like, oh no, it's not actually that good. Yeah,
exactly.
That's what I think the boys is like the special fast food burger item that is like limited time only. And it's so indulgent. But again, I think that's so well acted. I'm actually like quite like, some of the people that they have brought in, and then like, I'm actually quite sad to lose Newman, because I think once again, there's this very interesting thing that happens, which is Homelander's just like, she's a superhero. And then by the end of the episode, she's dead. And I want to know what happens when a superhero is president of the United States, which I guess will like, maybe, I guess, it's like somebody who's in Homelander's pocket who's going to be president of the United States. But
I mean, that was the thing. Like, I felt like they did next to nothing with her character all season long. And then she finally, like, the thing they've been hinting that she will do, finally does the thing. She gets outed as a superhero. She decides it's time to turn on, and then dies. And it's just like, couldn't we have been doing something with her prior to the? Couldn't we have been doing the she's on our side this whole time? and like doing something more interesting than just when is she going to turn? When is she going to turn? Oh, she's finally, and she's dead. That's like just again like part of the frustration for me. But yes, I think that the acting is still very fun. And one final thing though, this is very much just like rant session for me because I was frustrated with the finale. The smart character, smart superhero, whose name I can't remember.
Sage, I believe. Is that her
Sage,
name?
thank you. I love smart characters. I love masterminds. I'm a big like Littlefinger versus Varys guy. You know what I mean? Like I love those kinds of characters, and I really hate it when they are not done well. And I felt like Sage is not done well. Like
there's
it's hard to do smart characters well if you don't know how to write smart characters.
Yeah, there's a famous thing of like a smart character on TV show can only be as smart as the people who are writing it, which is no discredit to like the show, but like the world that they're building, like there's a lot of ways in which the show does not want to find solutions to problems. Like this is like they're almost like the opposite of Breaking Bad, where like Breaking Bad would intentionally paint itself in such a corner and move out of it, like move out of the corner in a way where they like find this new room, and it would be like so realistic. You'd be like, yeah, of course that person would die, but like whatever happens to Walter White, whereas this show is just like they don't get themselves out of the corner. It's just like suddenly like they're just like, I don't know. Everything's fine. Like the room is actually, we're never painted into a corner at all, So exactly. The show actually doesn't actively want to find solutions for the problems that it creates. And the problem of like Sage is that she is someone who should actively be able to create solutions to problems that are presented. But the show, if you do that, and this is a little bit, I've talked about this a lot on this podcast, but this idea of like when you're writing a novel, to like then cut the first like quarter of the book and start there because you're like in the story. And this is a show that just like perpetually wants to like be in the same story the whole time. Like it doesn't want to move anything forward because they don't want to lose Homelander on the show or Starlight on the show or Huey on the show or the Butcher on the show. And then even the secondary cast, they don't even seem to want to like, and that's who I think when I look at like who got killed in the final episode, like Newman and Aunt Grace, those are people who are like not consequential enough for me to feel like I am excited for the last season. I think the setup is interesting, but I would have preferred like, do we lose A-Train or somebody of significance that like gives a little more gravitas and let us keep the characters we've kind of just got to know to see what their story plays out in the final. And if they need to be killed in the final season, sure, but yeah, feels like people pop in to be killed.
I completely agree. I think that's the main issue with Sage, and like also the fact that like now that Sage exists, it feels like instead of making Sage super smart and being able to fix everything, because she can't fix everything because that would break the story, they are just making everyone else that much dumber in order to make her seem smarter, which is causing even bigger problems, I think. And then like the reveal that like, oh, this was my plan all along. It's one of my least favorite parts of this trope, where it's just like a bunch of random stuff happens and then the person's like, haha, all according to plan. And it's just like, okay, all right. So anyway, my feeling on The Boys season 4. So I'll give you my numerical ratings for these seasons.
Okay. Yes.
These do not have to coincide with anything else, but I liked the first season. I thought it was novel. I thought it was fun. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Second season, novelty was wearing off. I gave it a 7 out of 10. Third season, I was kind of frustrated with, but it had its moments. I gave it a 6 out of 10. Fourth season, I thought was going to maintain, but it did not by the finale because I was frustrated with the finale. I gave it a 5 out of 10. At this point, it's just average show to me. It doesn't even have anything special left. That's how I felt.
I think it's fair. I think it has been diminishing returns. I think the question is like, I often do have a tough time sometimes when it's like, oh, we're in the middle of this thing. Like there's a lot of stuff like, we're talking about House of the Dragon each week, and it's very tough because it's like, oh, I think that this scene will work better once we've seen the whole season. And I obviously have like insight into like, I've read the book, so I know that like, a scene that is happening might actually be important in a way that I hope it is. I have no frame of reference for this, for The Boys, but I do think if the problem has been, it's been wheel spinny, I do think like I could bump up shows in my rankings once we've seen the final season, because I think that not that it doesn't feel wheel spinning, it certainly does, but that might be resolved by a really strong last season. But this is Taran me being an optimist, so such is life.
I'm interested to see how they land the ship. I'm interested in seeing the final season to see how it all plays out. Even though it's even saying that though, it's like, do I really care? Like, they're just gonna probably kill Homelander and then live, and it'll probably be weird, but it'll be like, I don't know. Like, it doesn't feel like there's anything like super interesting about like how they're gonna resolve the plot. Like, it's just, there's not like that much going on. But I'll watch it. And we'll see. Maybe it'll be funny.
Yeah. We'll see. It's the catchphrase of our show. We'll see.
All right. Are we good with the boys?
I'm good with the boys. I think I think we pretty much, it feels very negative. I will say, when I'm eating the hamburger, I like the hamburger, just when this is exactly how I felt about Deadpool. It's like, God, I left and I think about it and it's like, God, maybe it wasn't good. So that's the boys.
Yes. I apologize. I will be negative throughout this podcast.
Okay. Fair enough.
As we move into.
Yes.
Let's talk about the Acolyte.
Let's do it, Taran.
Let's do it. We'll give a little bit of space here for you to pull your phone out and press pause or whatever you want to do. But we're gonna now spoil the Acolyte season 1. I'll give my baseline here, so that, to sort of hopefully set people up. I have already expressed first few episodes, I was like, this is a bad show. This is like actively a bad show. I don't think it's as bad as people are making it out to be. I think that there's a lot of review bombing going on, but for me, there's like no point in watching this show. Then it hit a peak. All of a sudden, whoa, wait a minute. This show is doing things.
Episode
I was excited.
5.
And we're spoiling, so now I can tell you what those things are. It's killing people. We're doing lightsaber battles.
Killing a lot of Jedi.
We're killing people that I thought were going to be like series regulars. Nope. I liked that girl. Oh, she's dead. Oh my God. That was fun. And then, what's his Manny
Jacinto,
Jacinto? AKA sexy ass arms. Love him. He's doing great. Very fun seeing him here. I totally, by the way, called that he was the master. Knew it. But even though I called it, I was like, oh, it works for me though, because I'm liking the performance. Fun episode. Then it got a little slower for me again. But it did, at least once that episode happened, felt like it was an actual show. Felt like I had actual stakes. Felt like there was an actual plan, and it wasn't just a series of like planet hopping assassinations that I didn't care about. And so it definitely like arrived, and anytime somebody whipped out a lightsaber, I was excited. And so I was more optimistic. I know there are other people that really were enjoying it. By the finale, I became very frustrated with the show. And I have some major issues with how the finale played out for me. However, what I will grant it is that I cared to be frustrated, whereas before it was pure apathy. So it did manage to like get to the point where I was invested enough to be annoyed, which is genuinely a tall task to achieve if I start with apathy, because if I start with apathy, that's usually a telltale sign that I'm not going to care about the show forever.
Okay. I think I'm higher on it than you are. I thought that the beginning of the show, while a little bit not slow, but I was like, what are we doing here? But there was at least these seeds of like what we could potentially be doing, which I will say, if I'm going to give myself credit, I don't know that I called it. I probably saw this theory and it was like, oh, that's what I want to happen, which is I wanted them to be the same person, which is the reveal we get at the end, which is that they were like created by the Force. So like one person who was split. I thought that was so cool. I don't know that I liked as much the like that they switch places, but I thought that overall that's fine. it's mostly fine, I think. I agree with you. I think the like choices that they made in the show were really like ruthless in a way that I thought was really fun for Star Wars, that loves to be like, remember this character? This is actually, somehow Palpatine has returned,
When
like,
is Saul coming back?
which I guess this show could do, and Force Ghosts absolutely exist in the Star Wars universe. But for the most part, like, a lot of people die en route to like ending the season with basically, Kymer having, gonna mess up. I think he has OSHA. And I loved the lightsaber turning red. Thought it was super great. And also, it's not canon breaking. If people want to, I don't think you're arguing with me, but people have been arguing it online whether the show was canon breaking. I don't think it was.
I've seen a lot of excitement from Star Wars lore nerds
Yes.
since they were very frustrated at first, but very excited by the end. So I'm assuming that any confusion at the beginning has since been mostly resolved and that people are excited, particularly because of Darth Plagueis and his involvement.
Yeah. He's a figure in the cave at the end of the season. So seemingly like maybe Chimere's like, boss or whatever. And a lot of people I think like are critiquing, the people who were critiquing the show, which maybe this is unfair because it's like bad faith argument anyway, but people who are like, we're not understanding that like the Jedi have also always been kind of like bumbling idiots who don't know what's going on. And people are like, but how could there be a Sith? The Jedi said there were no Sith. It's like, yeah, because the Jedi were idiots and refused to acknowledge that there were Sith. Like they just couldn't like see them and let the like uprising, boil beneath the surface. So I liked a lot of it. Like another show that I thought was mostly pretty well acted. And again, like The Boys, I won't spoil The Boys here because we're in this different section, but I think there's a lot of setup for a potential season 2 that excites me in terms of like what we could be getting, which is like May's memory having been wiped and OSHA now following Kymer, and then you have this character that I'm going to quickly get her name, Vanestra, who is like continuing basically like Jedi propaganda. Jess Sterling actually in the chat pointing out Jedis are just cops. Sort of like covering up that like what Saul did and how bad it was to try and basically like defend the Jedi Order. Don't love the last shot of the show. I'm fine with it if that's all the show is.
You're talking Yoda?
I'm talking Yoda. Don't love the Yoda ears. I'm kind of like not a big. This is a hot take. This is a hot take. I'm not really a big Yoda fan.
Wow, that's interesting. That's really interesting that Grace is not a big. She's gone. That's weird. I don't know what happened to Grace.
But
sorry.
I love Baby
I think
Grogu.
You cut out there for a second.
I love Baby Grogu. Baby Grogu is maybe my favorite. Character. So I'm just like. Everything's got to be part of it's like, and the boys, like, it's so far before it. I guess he is around at this time, but like, that's the part for me that I'm like, no, thank you. It's the same way I feel about like Mandalorian, where I feel like so much of what I loved about it was that it was like, because I'm not a childhood Star Wars fan. The prequels I definitely saw when I was a kid, but I didn't like fall in love with them. And then I think in university, I started watching Star Wars, and then Mando is really where I like fell in love with Star Wars. Watching that first season week to week, I fell in love with it, and I just loved how like separated it felt. And even like Grogu's the best way of basically being like, it's attached, but like whatever, it's baby Yoda. It's not actual Yoda, it's baby Yoda. And that was super fun. And the more it was like, all right, but here's all the other ways it like connects to everything else, the more I'm like, can I just have the thing that I want to watch? But they're trying to make a buttload of money off of everything to make you watch everything else. So that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's weirdly one of the things I liked the most about the finale was how connected it now feels to some things. Like it's still obviously like a separate story. It's in a different sort of time period, but there are these like ancient characters that are involved, like Darth Plagueis and like Yoda's around at this time. I'm not a Star Wars lore expert. But I do know the tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise. The Jedi didn't tell me, but I do know about it. And so like it's kind of exciting to see that stuff. I actually tried to read the Darth Plagueis book, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's not canon anyway, so who cares? So I liked that stuff. I want to say the stuff that I hated about the finale. There's two major things. Two major things. First major thing was that I did not feel like Osha's turn to the dark side felt earned.
Okay.
I felt like they built up this thing, and they also, like, for what it's worth, I don't know if they intended for it to be this way, but like I just, from very early on, I felt like they were already telling us that, yeah, Saul was pretty heavily involved, probably did some shady stuff. And then they took the kid. And I was like, yeah, okay. And I felt like even Osha kind of thought that. Like, I felt like, I don't know, I felt like that was just like assumed knowledge. So it's kind of weird to me that it was like this big reveal, like he did a thing, and quite frankly, it wasn't even like she turned into black smoke. Like, what? It's not that, like he didn't know he was gonna kill her. Like, it was a very, very confusing situation.
I mean, by the time you're like there to like, take the children away from then you kill the mom. I don't know. I feel like you're in the wrong spot already. I think you are to blame, even if you didn't know she would turn into black mist. I think.
But she's not even a real mom though. Like, she's just like a cult leader.
Right? Taran sounding a little JD Vance over here. Not even.
There's no actual parentage. She was created by probably Plagueis, right?
I'm Canadian, but I don't know. That seems to be a hot subject down in America this past week about. I mean, I don't know. I mean, not my mom, not her mom, but also I think cult leader mom. I don't know. She wouldn't be created without her. I don't know.
Which I don't know. Listen, I don't know enough about the lore. This felt like a very dark side experiment going on here. But
from the cult, yeah. But the Jedi covered it up. It was bad. It's bad.
Certainly. Listen, I'm not saying he did a right thing. I'm just saying I don't think it was like like there have been much worse things in the world of Star Wars that like Jedi have done. But like I think my point being that like what he didn't change what May did. She still locked people in and started a fire. Which also, like, she's a child. Like, why are we blaming her for that? But like, I don't know. The whole situation just felt like, okay, she learns this piece of information and then just instantly turns into like this murdering psychopath who is going to force choke the life out of Saul for like a minute and a half straight without letting up. Just did not, I don't know. For me, it did not feel earned from her character, the character that we've been following this whole time. And so that to me was like, I was watching this scene with like my eyes rolling into the back of my head. I was like, really? Like, this is, we're going here this quick. I'm perfectly happy to follow a turning story. I love them. But this was very sudden for me.
I think that's fair. I definitely feel like there's a tinge of this show being like, we have an idea and we have to execute on it and we have to do it this season. So we kind of just have to like get to it in a way where like not everything I think was given enough time. And this is a thing too, I think these days of like, short episode season runs. I think Andor was 10, right? I think, and this is 8. And I don't think there's like much more, but I do think if you've probably spent a couple more weeks here, you can probably add in some stuff that helps. I think the thing I'm going to say as a defense, and it's not my real defense, Taran, but I'm going to give you like the Star Wars sort of like explanation, which is, it's totally bogus, but I'm just going to give it so that I can say I've said it, which is that the whole idea of the Force is that there's like complete balance between the dark side and the light side. And so, and if you do have like basically if May then becomes, and they're basically created by the Force, but if May basically realizes like she's not bad and shouldn't be evil, then like essentially there needs to be a counter. This is like basically full George Lucas theory, and it when I say it sounds bad. It's bad writing, but it's fun. But this is the thing I'm going to say, which is like she has to be as like if they need to be balanced out.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? And so like, I mean, that's like you want more character development to like get you to the point where one of them is, they both come to their sort of like where they're supposed to be in the balanced force. But I, part of me sometimes too, like this is again how I feel sometimes about some of this other stuff we're watching. Like in the moment, I'm like, oh, that was cool. Which I do think the like lightsaber turning red, like sort of corrupting the crystal, I thought was a very cool visual. And that's one of the things the show I think had going for it more than anything was like episode 5 is so buoyed by like kick-ass lightsaber fights where like in this version there's a bunch of different color lightsabers and it looks amazing and it's well lit and all of that stuff. And so you still want the show to be good, but it looked great too. So I don't know.
Before I start praising it though, I have to talk about the other thing that I hated. Which and I hear the defense as well. My response is that's just not for me. The whole like, well, if one's good, the other one has to be bad.
Yeah,
doesn't matter what their characters think.
You're made by the Force, though, Taran.
Yeah,
that's
not for me. I perfectly understandable if it's for other people, not for me. The other thing I hated even more, and this is really what like sent me over the edge with this finale.
Wow, you hated Yoda too?
The memory wipe.
The memory wipe, yeah. The memory wipe, yeah.
I hate memory wipes in general. It's now I say that with a huge caveat that like, and I won't spoil it, but memory wipe has been done really well in the Star Wars universe. But this is not that for me. I am huge. There's another show that Manny Jacinto is on that does some memory wiping. I thought it was terrible. My least favorite part of that show. I do not like memory wipes. Again, I'm here for character. And when you just obliterate a character to like restart or just like put them in a new, like, it's just like, it's so frustrating to me. And I'm sure there is some kind of explanation that people who liked the show will give me that like it makes sense to them. And I'm very happy for you if it made sense to you. But for me, I watched this scene and I was like, wait, what? Why do you need to memory wipe her and leave her behind? This makes no sense. It feels completely made up on the spot in order to set up a new season where one is going to be with the Jedi again and then the other one's going to be here, but it wouldn't have worked unless we memory wipe her. And so we got to memory wipe her. And now we're going to do a different whole thing with her over there. And then I hate it. It made me not want to watch season 2.
Yeah, I think when the memory wipe is a solution to like a problem on the show, or like, it's rather than like where I feel like memory wipe has worked really well is like when it's like the central character at the beginning of the show, we don't know who they are, and we are going to slowly figure out who they are along with them, this is absolutely not that. Like, I don't think it's going to be that fun to figure out how May gets her memories back. They could prove me wrong, but that doesn't feel as interesting as like, I'm thinking of a movie like Memento or, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Like this stuff where like you sort of like uncover, it's an avenue, it's a tool for a mystery show, which we'll get into a little bit, I think, when we talk about like presumed innocent and like some of the balancing you have to do in like in a mystery type show. This is just, trying to figure out how to make it so that like they can do something in season 2. It's a solution to a creative problem that's not super
an extremely
exciting.
Convenient plot device meant to put pieces in the place that they want them to be. And I just, especially when it felt like it was a solution to a very short-term problem of like, they're chasing us, so one of us has to memory wipe, I guess. Like, well,
and the thing, I mean, I guess if like Manny Jacinto knows that like the Force must have balance, and if you create the strongest evil acolyte ever, like that's important. But I guess one of the things from the show I don't really understand is why not just have 2 evil acolytes who are both made from the Force? Why not just do that? But part of the like thing about the show is like they're the same person who was split in half and then they switch places. Like that's the thing, rather than maybe a logical conclusion to the stories of the show, which would be like, why not just have twin acolytes who are both badass and make them both evil?
Yeah, and
just have them both?
Listen, and Grace, maybe you can explain to me. I don't understand why Osha agreed to it.
I think Osha is like very mad at what happened to her because of the Jedi, right? That's why, right? She's like,
well, why does that like, she's super sad about losing her sister. Why is she okay with losing her sister?
I I don't have an answer for you. I have an answer for
Me
basically
neither.
I have an answer for everything else. I think you can see. I think the story of somebody who was taken in by the Jedi and like manipulated in a way, and this idea that like the original group that she's in is not necessarily trying to like. I mean, I guess they're like using the Force in a different way, but like I don't know how like
It's
they don't need to be governed by the Jedi. Like all of that stuff I get. And then you're like, you want revenge. Like basically May's storyline through the episode.
It's like she finally gets reunited with her sister after years thinking she's dead, thinking she's that she hates her. Finally gets reunited. Oh, I don't actually hate you. It turns out it wasn't your fault. Oh, this is so great. Finally reunited. But the guy with the scary mask says you need to memory wipe. And he seems so logical and trustworthy. I guess we just sorry. Just was weird to me. I hated it. That's what I hated about the show.
This is a complete, I think, a potential like launch to superstardom for Manny Jacinto of like they should just put this guy in stuff and let him be like he was so much my favorite part of The Good Place. I thought he was so funny. And I've seen him in a couple of other things, but I really didn't know he had like this in him to play like a more serious character and to like sort of give the monologues he gives in the show, which I thought were like extremely well acted. It's not that just like as you said before, it's good arms, but he's great. He should be in every blockbuster moving forward.
So I'm still not sure if this is true, but what I had read at one point was that they had not intended for his character to be so prominent in season 1, or that he was really going to be a part of season 1 at all. That he was intended to be more of a season 2 reveals or like thing. But they loved his performance. They loved like him so much that they were like, oh, we gotta get him into season 1. Again, I don't know.
They would have just had like May has a boss, but she doesn't know who it is. Like that's I guess. All right. Well,
I don't know how true it is.
To like,
I remember that I read it. If it's true, it makes a lot of sense to me. This like the season as a whole felt, or at least I would say his role felt tailor-made for him, in the sense that they start him playing the sort of like Jason character from The Good Place, where he's just kind of goofy and doing his thing, which you think, oh yeah, typecast this guy, only to then have him switch. It's almost like you get to see him make the transition from the actor you think to the actor you are now seeing, which I think is especially great for his career trajectory, to be able to see that transition play out. He does a really great job. And I think that, yes, like I wouldn't say across the board I love all of the performances, particularly like at the some of the Jedi I was not loving, but
I would agree with that.
Jay, I loved as Saul. I thought he did a really great job, especially at the end. Sad to see him go, quite honestly, because I think he was one of the highlights of the show. And I'm a little worried about like what the show does from here if we're going to focus more on the Jedi side of things that I'm not in love with. But I did like those performances, and as you mentioned, the visuals, the fight choreography. That's like Star Wars that I have been missing since like I've always been a bit of a prequel enjoyer, and so like back in the days of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, I'm like, oh yeah, we're getting that stuff again. I like it.
Yeah. I think one of those things, I enjoyed it while I'm watching, and then stuff I'm like, but I am intrigued by a season 2, and I do think it's like I do kind of love the bold choice of like, as good as Lee Jung-jae is as Saul, or I was excited to see Charlie Barnett because he's coming over from like Russian Doll, which Leslie Headland had created and wrote, so it was fun to see, and then just killed off, that's pretty fun. I do feel like there is a thing right now happening, Taran, and we're going to talk about it like probably with Presumed Innocent, where I do feel like the appeal of like coming to be in one season of a thing is appealing to movie stars at the moment, where like I could see them really being like, all right, well then if we lost all of these people in season 1, here's who you're getting in season 2. And there's like a whole rollout of like, all right, here's the cast announcement for the Acolyte season 2 to like join, Amanda Lestenberg and Manny Jacinto and whoever else is still alive. So
I hope so.
Yeah.
Hope so. Anything else on the Acolyte, Grace?
No, I think we covered it. Again, apologies for being so critical, but there's stuff I liked it. I'm pretty happy week to week.
No, it's I will do the apologies for being too critical. Grace is being much more balanced than me. She should not be the one apologizing.
Do you know what this is? You know why we're so balanced, Taran? Because of the Force. We have to be.
Oh, I don't like it. I don't like that for our podcast. I want it to be because of our character development and how we have developed into this world.
Yeah, Jess points out I'm also required by law to apologize because I'm Canadian, so you know.
All right, well, let's then move on to our third and final show of the podcast, and that is, of course, Presumed Innocent. And I will once again monologue a little bit here to give you a little bit of time in between as we transition to spoilers for Presumed Innocent. We will be spoiling the entire first season of the show, including all of the things that were mysteries that get revealed to us at the end of season 1. And I will spoil this for you right away. Presumed Innocent, I wasn't expecting it to be, but it was, by a decent margin, my favorite show of the 3.
I agree. I think it was my favorite. I think that there are definitely things I didn't love, and this is a show, once again, that I feel like when I watched it, I really liked it, and the more we're going to talk about it, the more I'm going to be like, here are the things I think they did not do well, and that don't really maybe even make sense, but I don't really care because it was so fun, I think, which is weird to say about a show about a murder, but I thought it was fun. Should we just rip the band off and we was spoiling it? Basically, he's Rusty Savage. He's accused of murdering his lover / coworker, and he has to be on trial. And then we have all these people, and then he thinks his wife did it. And he went back and he covered up her murdering him, but then it wasn't her. It was the daughter all along. It was Jade.
I'm sure there's plenty to talk about there. I do want to say that, like, for me, I started this show and I was like, it's an interesting premise. And then, episode 2, episode 3, episode 4, I'm giving like 6s out of 10. I'm like, it's barely breaking average for me. And it's mostly because of Jake Gyllenhaal. But like, this is a very frustrating story because it's just like every episode, it's like, here's the new thing that you didn't know about Rusty and how much of an asshole he is. But it's okay because Peter Sarsgaard is even more of an asshole. That Tommy guy, he's even worse. So you're going to be rooting for Jake Gyllenhaal. And I'm like, okay, fine. But like, it's pretty annoying. And then episode 5, I gave a 5 I was like, it's losing me. I feel like I'm done with this. I'm so sick of this show, just feeling like it's going nowhere. Episode 6 comes, they finally go to trial. And I'm like, oh, I love this. This is great. I gave it an 8 out of 10. I gave episode 7 a 9 out of 10. I was like, this is fun. The trial stuff was so much better for me. I was really enjoying it. And it really kicked like the season into gear for me, the show into gear, and is a huge part of why I ended up really enjoying the show. I feel like it was very entertaining. There were some twists and some turns, and they did the trial in a way that I really enjoyed, where it didn't feel like your classic kind of like, oh, well, this is the thing for this side, but there's always a thing that's going to happen for this side. It felt like, yeah, you could rack up some wins, but then the momentum might shift because of a small thing over here. And then the final cases being made by Rusty and Tommy, I thought were so fun. And I loved that Rusty went first. And he gave a very compelling speech. And then Tommy came up and he went after and has a speech that I didn't find as compelling. And I was like, if I were on this jury, I think I'd side with Rusty. But he's going second, and a lot of people look scared. But then the thing comes in, and it just kind of worked for me. It really worked for me. I really enjoyed all of that stuff. Of course, Peter Sarsgaard, Jake Gyllenhaal crushed it. I think that like there was a lot of really good acting, and it was just very fun from the trial point, especially for me.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is David E. Kelly. He's done, Boston Legal, Ally McBeal, Boston Public, Big Little Lies is sort of his newer one. He has a newer show called Big Sky, but he is really like, this is his wheelhouse of like, true crime, not true crime, I guess, fake crime. And, the thing that was interesting about this is like, why are they adapting this, movie that was adapted from a book, the book being from like the 80s, the movie being from the 90s? Like, why this? Other than to like have Jake Gyllenhaal in your Apple TV coverage. We talked about this. This show sort of like became the most watched Apple TV drama. That's how they're like billing it, which I presume is just probably because Ted Lasso was watched more, so it's not the highest watched show. But I do feel like a lot of people in my like little world and outside of it too, like my brother is often a good gut check of like not someone who's watching everything, and like he's talking about people that he's talking about this show with. I feel like it kind of became the hit of the summer to a degree, even if it's probably overinflated, because if you look at Apple TV subscription numbers, it's probably not that high. I thought this was week to week really fun. I definitely felt the feeling of, oh my God, Rusty, why didn't you tell us you were still sleeping with her? Like, that's the reveal of one of the episodes. Like, all of this information that, like, if you are actually a prosecutor in this moment, and we feel like, and I felt like the whole time, like, well, there's no way Rusty did it. And I was like, that's so annoying. I think if you look back now, knowing what we know from the end, I think this show will also work really well in a rewatch, because there's so much of what Rusty is doing that feels like if he's innocent, he shouldn't do it. And I feel like I thought he was innocent the whole time. And then we turn out he's not really innocent. He didn't kill her, but he then is complicit in the murder because he goes back and covers up because he thinks his wife does it. And that, to me, I think plays really well when you go back and think about everything. And even like his last speech, I think it like, and there's a way in which like I was never feeling like, oh my God, this is like the worst person. I felt like they were the family's under tremendous stress. And I felt like I did think it was Barbara, Ruth Nega's character, who did it the whole time. And I probably got incepted at some point without knowing it, because that's the ending of the book and the movie. That's entirely her. And so then you get this twist where he covered it up, and then you turn out it's Jaden. I think all of that from the Rusty and Barbara perspective, I think works really well in retrospect, in terms of the ways in which I actually thought the show wasn't working, that I think like, oh, I get it. And I don't know if that's like actually a compliment to the show, because maybe it should just work the whole time. But in terms of like now knowing what we know, I think the show is actually even more effective than I thought it was, except when it happens to be Jaden. I think the Jaden stuff is really weak and not a super strong thing. I almost would have like, so the pivot from the show to the book and the movie is that Rusty ultimately like figures out it was Barbara, like after the case is over, and she admits it, and it was her. She was like jealous, etc., etc. This twist is that like Rusty was kind of like tried to cover up for his wife, and then it turns out it's not his wife. I kind of wish they just left it with like the one reveal, like the first one. I almost wish they didn't have it be Jaden, mostly just because I think part of the problem, Taran, of a mystery show is you can't give too much away or it becomes too obvious. And this balancing act they have to play of like making us think it could be Tommy Malto, but then when you get too much Tommy Malto, you're like, well, it's not Tommy. And like when you get too much of like there's certain people you can start to rule out because you feel like they're too suspicious for what the show would want you to think. And if it ends up being that, it was too obvious. And you kind of need to ride this line that I think the Jaden reveal for me doesn't work. Ultimately, I still love the show, so it's fine. But I felt like it was one twist too many. But that's me.
I agree. I had not really been suspecting his wife Barbara, because it like, and I think I guess rightfully so, because like it felt like her whole story arc of like, kind of cheating on Rusty as sort of like a way for her to find her own independence, like just didn't really feel like something that a murderer would be doing at the time, right? And of course I wasn't thinking of like, suppressing the memories or anything like that. So I wasn't really thinking it was her.
I think Paul wiped her memory. That's a full spoiler
Right.
for the Acolytes. Apologies.
So I wasn't really thinking that, but from the second we saw the scene of her on the bike in the garage, I was like, oh wait, oh, it's her. And then he comes in, and the reveal that he has been covering for her, I thought was such a brilliant twist. And it does recontextualize everything that came before in terms of like, oh, that's why he's such an asshole.
Because
Like,
he's mad. He thinks he covered up his wife's murder, and he's like
exactly.
protecting her, and he's mad at her, and like,
And when
yeah,
she admits to cheating on him, and I'm just like, bro, how dare you be? You have to be like, listen,
I know.
understandable. But he's like, you need to take ownership in your part in this. I was like, wow, like how could I possibly be rooting for this guy? But it makes a little more sense when you know that he thinks that she has now murdered this woman.
And I do, because I'm like sadistic, I do kind of like think it's fascinating to think that like he's thinking that whole time. She's like, why the hell are you being such an a-hole? And then it turns out like it's because he thought she did a murder, and it turns out he's wrong. Like that's fascinating to me. Then when we loop in like the movie and the book are very like, it's about like romance and love, and the show does, I think, try to like go one step further and be like, this is about family. And like we literally end on a Thanksgiving dinner scene, right? Of like happy-go-lucky family. What will you do? What are you willing to do for your family? In a way that I think is like fine, but I do think we could have had enough with just that initial reveal and it being Barbara, or I think not somebody from the family, but I don't know. I guess that doesn't work, that they then have to like protect each other, because other than that, Rusty's now,
I mean,
complete, and she would just leave him, right? She would just leave. So
I think
she didn't do
if,
the murder.
I think if they want to do she didn't actually do it, which I think is a pretty fun twist on top of the twist.
Yeah.
I think that's fine. As long as it's not Jaden. I think that like if the end is her being like, what are you talking about? I didn't do this. And him being like, oh my God, what have I done? Like that's kind of a fun ending for me. That honestly, if they had left it there, I would have been really impressed with the ending.
But then you don't know who did the murder?
I don't even need to know who did the murder. Because that alone is enough to be like, oh, wow. Like he was kind of guilty to some degree.
I think you got to know who did the murder, though. I think you got it.
Listen, you can then go to then you can go to Tommy and be like, Tommy did it, or you can go to whoever and be like, they did it. I don't care.
The thing I like about Tommy, though, just for Tommy is probably my favorite character on the show, and I am kind of desperate that if they're going to keep any thread between season 1 and season 2, if it's an anthology of any sorts, but there's a connective tissue, I want Tommy to basically be like my like Jennifer Coolidge of the White Lotus. I want him hanging around. What I really like is that he's kind of a guy who is disliked and kind of like, but he didn't do anything wrong. And I think that's so interesting. Yeah,
I agree with you. I think Tommy really worked as a character. I think Peter Sarsgaard did a really great job with him. I love that, like, it's almost like there's a reveal that he's like a cat guy, and that's like very fun. And so yeah, I mean, I think that if anything, again, I feel like not knowing who did it is stronger. And for me at least, it would have been a stronger ending, especially because like Rusty has to come to grips with the fact that his covering up of this murder means that they will never find the real killer. And it's all because of
that is pretty interesting. Okay, I like that.
So I thought at the very least, the twist that the wife did it and that he was covering up for her, or whatever combination of that it was, I thought was really good. I thought it was really well done. And especially because I'd heavily considered the children all season. I thought it was either the son or the daughter all season long. And you know why? Because that's the twist in every single one of these freaking shows. I'm not going to name which ones, but I'm telling you, every single one. It's like, oh, the kid did it. Whoops. And it's been done way better in other shows. But like, I did not like that part of it. And then when I then subsequently found out that the wife did it is the book ending, I was like, yeah, because that's a good ending.
But
And
just the wife does it. He
Yeah.
like finds the murder weapon in the garden and then is like, "You do this?" She's like, "Yeah, I did it." So
And then
yeah.
for me, it felt like this ending was too cute. This ending was, you book people think you know what's going to happen, but wait, there's an extra twist on top of the twist. And for a non-book reader, it just did not land. But there's another part of it that didn't land either, which is that, and I think this was a necessary part of making any of this twist work, was that like him explaining, I got there and she was dead. And I just knew, who else would have done this other than my wife? And so I immediately started tying her up and covering up the, like why? Why that part of it? Why not just do, especially, you can do it with this twist, you can do it with the wife twist. Either way, you can do like, hey, this was a teenage girl that did this. And so she left some stuff behind because she's not an expert killer. And he finds the stuff and connects it to his wife accidentally instead of his daughter, and then has to hide. And that's why he very much knows it must be his wife in his mind. Like some kind of physical evidence that he would have had to cover up specifically that would have linked his wife and or daughter to the crime, that would have made his actions feel a lot more believable to me, more so than just like, it must have been my wife. Like, that was just such a weird assumption to make to me. Like, you might think maybe, but not enough to actively cover up the murder, in my eyes.
Yeah, well, I think there's two, like, I mean, this is exactly what I mean, that the more you talk about this, it doesn't make any sense. Why does he go back in the first place? Like, there's really, other than that, like, he's in love with her, I guess. Like, but he already went there and then he comes back. And
I think it's fine. The guy was obsessed. He sent 30 texts. He probably left, started feeling insecure, and then had to go back again.
I will say, all the times that he's in the courtroom and he's like, and I was in love with her. And you're like, what a dickhead to say this in front of like his wife. And he thinks his wife murdered her. So he's like, I was in love with her. And then he turns out his wife didn't murder her.
Turns out the whole time he was just guilt tripping.
Oh, I think that stuff is very, very great. Yeah, I think like there's a lot, you know, even Jaden's like sudden, I think it's interesting to think about whether or not Carolyn is that sequence of the scene we get where Jaden kills Carolyn. How true and authentic is that? The way that Carolyn is actually quite mean to be like, hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm actually having your dad's baby, you know, in a way that like, it's not like ruthless, but it's pretty like, you know, this is a pretty emotional kid and you probably don't need to say right there, like, I'm pregnant with your dad's baby, you know? So, but how true is that?
Yeah.
Like, if these are all kind of just like not great people, then maybe that retelling of that story is it has a little bit more of an edge than actually happened in real life. But then I think about like, Jade, like, we're really just going to be like, well, Jaden killed that girl. We just got to move on with their life. You know, like, I don't know. There's just like aspects of that I don't love. But again, the piece of like so if you have a piece of evidence that he then is like, he's hiding and he's, you know, I guess what you're probably saying is like, we have to reveal that only in the last episode, because all the way up until that point, like, they probably don't want the screeners for the show were every episode except the finale. So they really wanted to keep people in the dark about like the twist of the show. They wanted people to get most of the show and then be surprised by the ending. And they're, you know, as we're saying, like, anybody can just look up like what happened in the book and the movie. And so you can't really have that piece of evidence. But, and this is the hardest part about mystery, like crime, murder stuff, is like, how much do you put in and how much do you purposely leave out, and finding that balance of making the show still feel rewarding. And like, you can try to figure it out. There's a really interesting, Lord and Miller, I think, talked about this with The After Party, which is a murder mystery show, where they're like, we actually want people to basically figure it out by like episode 6 of a 10 episode season. And that's where they feel like is the balance between letting people play along without giving it away and making it too obvious too early. Because I think a lot of the problems I have with this, for me, the Jaden stuff, like, there's not a single scene. Jaden is very worried the whole time. She's like, they took my laptop. There's a lot of like stuff that is like worry, but I don't see like outburst of anger from Jaden in a way that I think like makes the final choice make sense.
Yeah.
but that's because they don't want to put it in there, because for us to be like, well, Jaden has random outbursts, and so she's upset. So it's a balance of these mystery shows to figure out how to do it. I think the show mostly did it pretty exceptionally well. And my take about season 2, a potential season 2, is I cared way less about any Savage family drama. All of that was so much less interesting to me, as you're saying. Like, I loved the final closing statements. I loved the like interworking of the department. I want that to be so much more of a focus for me than and the way that like it is interesting of like, okay, what happens if like the case is like within a bubble of sort of the prosecuting, you know, the district attorneys here. Like, that to me is an interesting premise that I don't know if they'll just like go to another city or they'll do something totally different. If we stick here, I just feel like we have to figure out how to not have the Savages involved, and we bring in another big
I mean, just going back to you were talking about like how we went on a bit of a journey.
I know, I did like 7 things there. Yeah.
Going back to like how real was the confrontation? Like, to me, that was very much like a Big Brother episode where like they edited that so that we would blame the daughter as little as possible for the murder, and the end result was that it was so unrealistic an interaction that we are now questioning like the validity of the retelling. But I think that like just speaks to the failure, I think, of the show to set up the daughter as a killer, but still we are supposed to feel like empathetic and like we want the family to succeed. And so like I think that doesn't quite work. But like in terms of setting the daughter up as the killer, I do feel like they threaded enough in there for it to work. I think that's fine for me. What I would have really enjoyed, I think, you know, especially if we are not doing the daughter, but even if we are, is like, and this maybe changes the tone too much, but like, I was imagining a world where instead of a billion twists on top of each other, it's the wife did it, the husband covered it up, the daughter did it. Like that's 3 twists thrown at you at once. Like I'm kind of imagining a world where it's like not guilty, head in hands, right? Like relieved result. And then we get the flashback to him tying up the body. And it's like, wait, I just rooted for that. Oh my God. And it's just enough time for me to be worried before I realize what's happening. And then he talks to his wife. And I'm like, he maybe did it. Oh no, she did it and he covered it up. Oh my God. Right. And I feel like there was maybe some space there to be doing some more stuff. And to make me feel like he might have, because I never believed he did it throughout the entire show. So if they had given me a moment where I thought maybe he had, I think that would have been kind of fun.
Well, I mean, again, I feel like this is the third thing we've talked about this week where I'm like, in the moment, I was like, I was vibing with it so hard of like, oh my God, Barbara did it. And then it's like, okay, but oh my God, he actually is complicit too. And then, oh my God, it's Jaden. And that one, I'm like, by that point, I think to your point, I'm like, that's a lot, but that's whatever, you know. But the first 2 I thought really did work for me. I wonder whether there's a world where the stuff that we get at the beginning of this episode actually comes at the end of last episode, because we don't really, I think ultimately we don't really, I mean, we do to a degree, whether or not Rusty is found guilty or found, that doesn't really matter. What actually matters is who killed Carolyn. And
see, I was the opposite. I cared way more about the trial than I did who actually killed her.
Interesting. Well, I just kind of assumed he wouldn't be found guilty, I think, but maybe I'm wrong.
I honestly, like, I wasn't sure because I mean, I assumed he'd probably win, but like, because I felt like it was so obvious he didn't do it, that made me feel like it was more likely, if anything, that he might actually be convicted.
Right, because then you could have this whole thing where like the reveal happens, you know, over the between glass of like,
because he's such an asshole. Like, you know, like it feels reasonable that he would have a bad ending.
Yeah. the fire poker thing. I mean, I guess to a degree, I always thought, because I thought it was Barbara, I did think it was interesting to watch her play. There are some moments where she's like, well, isn't it better if the fire poker becomes like, becomes evidence or whatever? Like that stuff to me was really interesting. There's an interesting reality show comparison, Taran, to have about, I don't think we really want this, but I'd be interested in a version if they can if they just remade Presumed Innocent. Again, I know it's a book and a movie, whatever, but another where this is the difference between the mole and the traitors. Where in the mole, we don't know what happened. And then, I mean, I guess this is just rewatch the season and then you get it. But in the traitors, you do know and you're watching them maneuver. And what I thought was, as when I was watching and thought it was Barbara, and there's conversations where it's like, should the fire poker, wouldn't they want that? And what if someone leaked it that it was, and I'm thinking the whole time, like, she's leaking it because I think that if where I'm going with this, and this is ultimately what happens with Jaden, when Jaden gives the fire poker to Tommy Malto, she breaks into somebody else's house, is because she thinks it seems likely that my dad is going to go to jail and I should make sure he goes to jail, because if he doesn't go to jail, there's the potential that they actually try to continue to find who the killer is. And then they figure out it's me. And so I thought that stuff is interesting. Like, I guess on a rewatch of like how they're all playing with this, knowing it's sort of like all within their family. But
well, I think that's probably one of my stronger critiques of the show in general, is that I felt like by the end of the show, and because I started the show never even knowing it was an adaptation of anything. Right. And by the time I finished the show, I learned of that fact, and also just kind of felt like the show was a little bit more for people who already knew the story than it was for me. Right. And for them, they probably got a little bit more out of it than I did. Right. Because there was like, they were watching the wife storyline the whole time, being like, she does it, but she's acting like she didn't do it. Like, this is weird. You know what I mean? And so like, there's, I think, more to be like, maybe she really didn't do it. And then they're thinking in a totally different way than I think I was. I was watching the whole wife storyline the whole time being like, I mean, I get it, but what's the point? This is kind of boring.
I mean, that's so interesting. I mean, it's so, yeah. Can I ask you, Taran? I think I think that you keep this thing going as a Tommy Malto, Skarsgård vehicle. You keep in the same distributing, and you bring in another big star who can play the Jake Gyllenhaal role, but it's not Jake Gyllenhaal. It's like some different version of some case that's happening within this world. What do you want out of a season 2 of Presumed Innocent?
I honestly have no idea. I know that there are more books, and I know
there's a time jump.
If we very light spoilers, I've seen the plot of the next, I think, book, but I know that the characters do stick around. That like Rusty is in future books in some capacity. Tommy is in future books in some capacity. So it would not surprise me if both actors stuck around. I don't know if they would do a time jump. I don't know if they would do something in between. But you know, it feels, I don't know. I don't know enough about the books. I would be happy to see a completely different thing. I think going straight back to Tommy and Rusty might feel a little tired. But if we come back to them later, I feel like that would feel a little better.
I don't want Rusty. I don't need Rusty in the show anymore. I want Tommy.
I mean, Rusty. I think Rusty's coming back one way or another at some point.
You think so? I don't know. I think it's harder to not have Rusty if you stay in Chicago. So, is that where they are? Am I mixing that up with another show? I think they're in Chicago. It doesn't matter. Whatever.
Couldn't tell you. Chicago, yes.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. It's probably my favorite show of the summer, just in terms of like a thing that was, I thought, mostly pretty good, even if I have critiques of it, and was super fun to be chatting with people about all summer. So I quite enjoyed it, and am happy that they renewed it. I also wonder, to your point about like, if you leave the cliffhanger of like who killed them, I wonder if that's more effective or less effective if they
future seasons.
They were being. I know, but then I feel like I want to mostly be removed from this world, other than I want Skarsgård back on my screen. Honestly, I want it to be pretty disconnected from season 1. I want it to be like case of the season. That's kind of what I mostly want, because I like this anthology thing that a lot of networks are doing, where they, White Lotus, True Detective, Fargo, like some of my favorite shows the last few years. And I think Presumed Innocent could like slot nicely into another like reliable type of thing. I love sort of the crime series genre. I just loved Skarsgård so much as Tommy Molto that I want him back, but I would be fine to sacrifice him if it means we're dealing with a different case, maybe in a different city.
All right. Well, I think that's what we have then for Presumed Innocent. As I said, definitely my favorite of the three. And I still had some issues with it, but especially by the end, like those final 3 episodes, I was glued to my seat. I was really enjoying it. And so that I was very surprised that happened. It's pretty unusual for me to like feel like there's a huge jump in quality, or at least my interest in a show that deep into it. So I was very pleased with Presumed Innocent. And
where do you rank Big Brother if you added a 4th? Where are you ranking it so far?
In terms of like Big Brother, the Big Brother does not feel like a TV show to me, for what it's worth.
Fair enough.
So that's it. That's what we have for our spoiler. It's a little bit of a jumbo size spoiler episode.
Yeah, big episode, long episode. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe 3 was a bit too big of a bite for us. I don't know.
If people want more of this was certainly a test to see, no pun intended, although pun intended, an appetite for this type of like spoiler-filled combo. We'll probably be back to our usual we definitely will be back to our usual, like, what are we watching? Should you check it out in a spoiler-free way? And if there's shows that you want us to talk about either in that way or in a more spoiler way, make your voices heard. Let us know, because could be potential for that down the line again.
Yeah, let us know what you are thinking. I will let everyone know that the other shows that I watched this week. I checked out Time Bandits.
I did as well.
I watched an episode of Sunny. I watched another episode of Lady in the Lake, and I caught so far 3 episodes of Those About to Die, and I plan to watch more of Those About to Die. So I definitely want to like dig into that show a little bit. Probably next week if I've got the time. So that's what I'm up to.
I thought Time Bandits was fun, but nothing groundbreaking.
I mean, my thoughts on Time Bandits is essentially, I don't know if I'm going to keep watching.
yeah, it's definitely one that I'm like, I want to love it so bad, but I don't know that I love it. I do want to check out Those About to Die for sure.
Yes, in terms of things I plan to actually talk about, Those About to Die. The other ones I can give comment on, but I would not necessarily recommend any of them. All right. Anything else, Grace?
No, we talked about a lot today. This was good.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us then today. Of course, we'll be back next week. Talk the rest of TV and movies and other things that are happening. We'll also, the finale of House of the Dragon will be airing. Next week on Sunday. So we will be fresh off of that. I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about here as well in terms of what the response has been to the season as a whole, and what we can look forward to in the future. Maybe like, again, like, we talked about industry, but like, what is the next show in general for like culture to be focusing on in terms of at least this kind of prestige television. So plenty to talk about next week. Tune in. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see all of you next time.